Hello everyone, welcome to Kelly's Art Throb. I'm Kelly, and today I'm going to share this boldly colorful, joyful piece of art with you. I started out by spraying the paper down to get it all wet, and then I took one of my biggest brushes and went over it again to evenly distribute the water on the paper. This is a really cheap brush and it sheds hair, and I got a little hair on the paper, but I was able to just kind of dig it up with the edge of the brush. No muss, no fuss. While the paper is wet, I'm going to drop in some nickel yellow azo, and I only use 3 colors for watercolor: nickel yellow azo, phthalo blue, and quinacridone rose. The paper's pretty wet, so all I'm doing is wetting my brush, putting some fairly concentrated amount of pigment on the brush and splattering it. That's all I'm doing here. Wherever I want to add another color, like where I don't have yellow, I sprinkle some yellow down. Where I don't have blue or quinacridone rose, I sprinkle that down. And the paper is pretty wet, so the paint is going to do all the mixing for me. I'm not going to move the paint around at all at this point. Once I started seeing puddling on the paper, I decided to drip it down to help mix the colors up a little bit. And then I took my mostly dry brush and ran along the edge to get any excess. And then I just added some more pigment onto the paper. I'm getting a lot more confident about that dripping procedure, and I just continue to drip it from side to side, add a little bit more pigment, and continue doing that repeatedly until I got enough saturation that I thought I would be satisfied with it. There came a point where the paper was dry enough that it wasn't dripping very much, so I took my spray bottle and I sprayed it again. I gave it a good squirt. And that's kind of important because at this point, that is going to create some cool texture that we're going to see in just a moment. I'm going to have to remember this because even though it was wet enough to drip now that I had sprayed some, it had dried enough that I got that sort of cool texture. And I want to be able to repeat this again because I was really happy with the way that looked. The paper has dried, so now we can take a look at that texture. It almost looks like granulation, but these are not granulating colors. And it's really pretty cool. You could only get this on cold pressed paper. You could not get this kind of texture with hot press. I'm using a circle template and I'm going to put circles around the painting. I'm keeping in mind composition, but I'm also keeping in mind the patterns of the colors that were created when I made the background, because that's going to be an important part of the whole picture. Once I've got the majority of the circles penciled in, I'm going to use a fountain pen with platinum carbon black ink because it's waterproof, and I know I'm going to probably watercolor over this a little bit, and I'm definitely going to use some Posca markers on top, so it's important to use a waterproof ink. There's a fair amount of hemming and hawing that goes on during the inking process, especially of a painting like this for me, because it's very intuitive. I start out with kind of a vague idea, and I know that I want to put in some random doodle type lines, and in the back of my mind I'm thinking glass beads and tiles and things that you would find outside in the garden. you know, the embellishments that we put in our gardens. I love glass beads. I love anything that catches and reflects the light. And I want that really summer, brilliant, carefree vibe in this picture. But other than that, I don't have a lot of plans. It's very intuitive. I did speed this up 3 times, so it's at 3 times the speed that I am actually drawing. And I did that because all the footage together was over 7 hours, and I can't do that to you. But I also don't want to cut out too much because the process of watching it is fairly enjoyable too. It's fairly relaxing to see how this kind of comes together. As always, I'll put a list of the supplies that I used in the description. So if you want to try this kind of color scheme or some of the stuff that I did, you'll know what I used. I'm using a fountain pen with a standard fine nib. It's thick enough that it lays down pretty good lines, especially on this textured paper. Normally, I like to use either fine liners or some kind of a technical pen, but this paper is just way too textured for that, and using a fountain pen with platinum carbon ink is a really good solution. I'm going right over this background because I know the Posca pens that I'm going to use are opaque. So only the background that I want to show through is going to show through. And it's going to become part of the overall composition and lend a really lively feel. The mood I'm trying to create with this piece is movement and dancing and joy and rhythm. I'm also making use of the black lines as the foundation for what I'm going to put over it. Have you ever noticed how black will make really bright colors pop? That's what I'm going for without it getting too heavy. And I'm using the pen to create the circles and the tile squares that I'm going to fill in later. I'm going to use yellow Posca over these little round bead looking things that I created where what look like threads are pulled together. And then I'm going to make bigger beads with this blue Posca marker. I love the juxtaposition of these very opaque, brilliant colors on top of the very transparent, vibrant watercolors. It lends a really festive, lively feel. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I would go to the pool and all the bright colors in the swimsuits and the beach towels and the beach bags and the umbrellas and laying out with really big sunglasses. Takes me back. It also makes me think of a farmer's market or a bazaar where people are selling handmade goods like woven textiles and handmade jewelry. Oh, and wearing Madras plaid pedal pushers. Typically, you don't want to use white paint in your watercolors. You let the white color of the paper help create a lighter value. However, in this case, what I really wanted to do was create a milky appearance, sort of an occluded appearance. So I used some white watercolor, titanium white. It's not gouache, so it's more transparent than gouache, but it will definitely make it seem duller. And the way a neutral color or a dark color can make brilliant colors pop, I'm dulling down and making it milky in some areas, and I want to see if that does the same thing but in a different, more subtle way. My first car was a robin's egg blue Volkswagen Beetle. and it was so old that the paint had gotten dull. It wasn't shiny anymore. And I always had stuff hanging off the rearview mirror, and it had pom-pom fringe on the inside. I loved that car. It was the funnest car I ever had, except for the fact that it stranded me everywhere. And this reminds me of that car. This part reminds me of a dream catcher so much. And it wasn't intentional. I was just embellishing and doodling inside of it and having a pretty good time, just listening to music and thinking my own thoughts. Because the colors take me back to the 1970s so much, when I was an adolescent growing up, listening to music and sitting by the pool. That was the best. Oh my goodness, the Doobie Brothers. And I didn't even know what a doobie was back then. I thought a doobie was kind of like, you know, we say doodle for drawing. I thought doobie, it was just like doobie doobie doo. I don't know. I was so innocent. But I still love the Doobie Brothers. So how I'm choosing the colors for this is I'm looking at, you know, the sort of background, and I'm putting almost the opposite or a complementary color on these circles. That's sort of a greenish yellow, and I'm putting a pink, which is like a, you know, it's kind of like red. So they're not exactly opposite, but they're kind of. And then I put this corally color in there that goes with that sort of turquoise. I don't know. I was just looking to see what I thought was going to pop out, what was going to go. And I really just was having a good time selecting colors. And I decided to add a little white around the rim. And then on the inside, I decided to make it a little bit darker, more vibrant. So I did, and I like it. Although I have to say, I don't think it's more vibrant, just darker. But I like the contrast. I'm not really sure how to describe this one, except that it kind of reminds me of ladders around, I don't know, like if you were going up a manhole or something, except, I don't know. It's like a child drew the ladders and didn't know how to draw them going up and down. But they're really tiles, I guess, that I end up putting color in. And I just embellished in different ways, just whatever the mood struck me. Not anything super particular. I don't know, I guess they could be like trapeze ladders, you know, from the circus. I don't know, did you guys ever go to the circus? I think I went once. I remember going to the Ice Capades, and it was like a Disney show or something, and one of the skaters came up and held out her hand, but I was too scared to go out on the ice with her, so I missed that opportunity. I hesitated. If it sounds like there are a million things going on in the background, that's because there are. We lost power for about, not a full 24 hours, but probably about 16 hours. And we were really lucky we didn't have any damage this time. We didn't lose any part of our fence this time. But we did lose all the food and our refrigerator and our freezer. So, and also, because I had spent a lot of time working on this video yesterday, and fortunately I did not lose my work, but I was just waylaid, and I had promised to do a bunch of stuff today. If I got, with the promise that I could have all day Friday afternoon and evening to do this video, the voiceover and the editing. And then this weekend I would help with other things. And so not only did I not get to do the video, I couldn't do the other things. So I'm cramming it all in. And I appreciate your patience. I should really learn not to announce that I'm going to have a video, because it seems like every time I do that, something happens. And I'm not complaining. I mean, honestly, I'm not, because there were people whose trees fell over, hit their cars or whatever, hit their roof. And there are people who need electricity to run their ventilators or some other life-saving device in their home. And it is an inconvenience, but it's okay. It just delayed things a little bit. So thanks for your patience. And yeah, so I did laundry today. I got all the laundry done, and did dishes by hand, and just did stuff like that while in between doing this video. And my husband just got back from the grocery store, so if you can hear a bunch of stuff going on in the background, he and one of my kids is unloading the car and putting stuff in the refrigerator. So, and the air conditioning is cycling on and off constantly, because I guess it's pretty hot, or at least maybe it's very humid, and it just keeps going on and off. But I don't dare ask my family to let me turn off the air conditioner, because they were without air for like 16 hours, and I think they would, they might have me drawn and quartered if I turned off the air conditioner now. Someone in the comments said that they're in Nebraska and they had really bad thunderstorms too. And I hope everything is okay and you don't have any damage. No one was hurt. That's the main thing. No one's hurt. And if something is damaged, hopefully you have insurance, and you're inconvenienced as little as humanly possible. And it's weird for us to be getting storms this late. It's mid-July. Usually the storms are over by mid-June, but nothing is typical anymore, is it? And why should I be surprised? My husband just came in and made me aware that we have to keep some of our spoiled food in the freezer and the refrigerator. Well, not in the refrigerator, but the top shelf is 2 things of ice cream. That's all that we have. The stuff on the bottom shelf is spoiled, and in our refrigerator, he took everything out and put it on ice, and that way it's not going to smell bad in our trash before trash pickup. And then he bought a bunch of other ice to stick aside in case, you never know. These things come in waves. So we're going to be prepared. And I was very bummed because I had just been to the grocery store. We had all kinds of food. So anyway, back to the painting. Oh, but first, does anyone else have a hard time sleeping when there's no power? None of us slept very well last night. And, considering we without power, we lost our food. We had to go to McDonald's to eat breakfast this morning, and we had Panda Express for dinner, or I should say dinner. It was lunch and dinner. We're in pretty good moods, really. Everybody's in pretty good humor, so maybe we're just relieved. But I imagine we're all going to sleep really, really well tonight. Now back to the painting, for real this time. As YouTube art goes, this was one of the pieces that I've spent the longest on. I didn't spend as much time on it as I did on some of my neurographic art, but I spent quite a bit of time, and I just got engrossed in the joy of making art. And I sometimes don't like to do that because it takes so long to edit the video, and I usually end up spending way more time editing than I actually did on making the art, because trying to determine what to keep and what to cut. Otherwise, it has to be sped up so fast, or it gets very, very tedious. So hopefully I've done a good job of showing you guys the process and communicating the enjoyment of making a piece of art like this without it becoming too tedious. And yeah. In a couple of these circles, the outside of the circle was a little dull, so I decided to brighten up the center of the circle. And I'm doing it with nickel yellow azo, which has to be the best yellow on the planet. It's vibrant, it's transparent, it's got great staining power, and it's just, I can't do without it. Honestly, I think that if I could only have 3 colors, it would be the 3 colors that I used in this painting: nickel yellow azo, phthalo blue, and quinacridone rose. It's time to change things up a little by putting some irregular shapes around this circle. I want to keep everything very cohesive, so it doesn't look like I'm doing 2 different paintings, but I also don't want it to get too monotonous, and I think it's important to add some differences. Just like you would find in nature, everything isn't exactly the same. Even in the same environment, there are variances. It seems like another dream catcher here, and I'm just adding some bits and bobbles and some color, and again putting sort of opposite colors in from what's going on in the background to make it pop out a little bit. And a lot of hemming and hawing, again trying to figure out what to do, but it's good to take the time to take a look at it and see what it needs instead of just blindly going forward, at least for me. As this developed, I noticed that I was putting a lot more embellishment on the inside of the circles than the outside, and that intuitive process, it was very unconscious, just looking at the piece to decide what it needed, and the inside is where it's all at. Is that the mark of an introvert? Did you ever take those Myers-Briggs tests where they determine whether you're an introvert or an extrovert? I was squarely in the middle. I feel like every aspect of my personality is in the middle. I don't know, that's just where I live, right in the middle. I have to have other people to be stimulated and, to have that sort of excitement. But then in order to get going on the project, I have to do the work by myself. I don't know if that makes sense. But so you guys are actually part of the process. I don't know. I'm thinking of you guys when I do the art, and I'm thinking of other people and coworkers, family, friends, other artists. But then when it comes down to the work, it's very introverted. It's very all about what's going on in my head. So there's my Myers-Briggs analysis of my personality, I guess, and how it relates to my art. And we're just about at the end of this journey with this piece of art, and it's time to see the final reveal. I put the tape at exactly 8 by 10 inches, so it would fit into an 8 by 10 mat. and I didn't have a lot of room for the staples, so the staple holes are going to remain. But I just love the colors of this painting. I love the feel of it. I love everything about it. And I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Thanks a lot for watching. Smooches. Bye.